You're listening to the Clean Comedy Podcast with your host, James Creviston.
Hey, everybody, it's James, the Clean Comedy Podcast, and today I have a great, amazing guest. This is a cool story because I just had my birthday, and my friend Kevin Alderman was like, hey, can I bring somebody to the dinner? And I was like, yeah, sure, whatever, I don't care. And we ate at the Smokehouse in Burbank. If you've never been there, really good place, delicious. And in comes this guy with Kevin, and I was like, oh, I wonder who this guy is. This is going to be cool. And he introduced himself as Tarun. And he's super cool and super funny and super nice. I learned he's a comedian. He worked at the Boston. He's a writer. He went to, I believe he went to film school. He wrote a book. He is a writer. He's an actor. He's all these things. I was like, dude. And then we'd be like, I don't know about him, but about his point of view on this, but I feel like we became friends like pretty close to instantly. And then we hung out the rest of the night. We went to the Improv, all the stuff. It was a great time. So please welcome the very funny, the very talented, the very amazing, and my new friend, or at least I consider my new friend, Tarun Shetty. Welcome, sir.
Thanks for having me, man. And thanks for letting me crash your birthday party randomly. I had no idea, and you guys are all cool. Something about hanging out with comics.
It's like we're brothers automatically, right?
Yeah, you kind of just get the trials and tribulations and just have the associations in place.
Yeah. It was awesome. So you started out in New York and you started out at the Boston. Now, if anyone's ever seen Crashing, that's also where Pete Holmes does all his stuff, is the Boston in New York. I don't know. It was really like that. You've seen Crashing, I assume, right?
Yeah.
Was it like that? Did it look the same way and all that stuff?
Yeah, it did. I mean, because Pete actually worked at the Boston. So the Boston Comedy Club was started by Barry Katz, and it was this club in the Village, like this old school comedy club. So a lot of famous alumni worked the door there, from I think Neil Brennan, Sarah Silverman,
Wow.
Pete Holmes, many of Bert Kreischer was there right before I was there. So it's this lineage of just comedians.
But it's closed now, correct? Like it doesn't exist anymore. It closed I think it closed like COVID time, right?
It closed. I don't know when exactly it closed, but it's not there anymore.
Yeah. So how long were you there were you a doorman, and what was that like? Because most comedians never work at a club, right? We just go do open mics and then hope to do shows or whatever. But working there, you have to see, you basically get inside baseball, right?
Yeah, I think I was there, I want to say maybe 3 years. I worked there through college. There was a lady named Gina Savage, who's I think still books rooms in New York. She hired me. I worked the door with this guy named Dub Davidoff, who's a pretty established comedian. And just this, everybody was coming up back then. I mean, I hate to age myself, but that's what it was. Like Kevin Hart, Big J, Kurt Metzger. We used to see like Chappelle roll through, like when he wasn't Chappelle he is today. Dane Cook. I got to meet Mitch Hedberg there. I got to meet Richard Jeni there.
Wow.
Like really, for me as a young comic, I was in college then. It was just cool. It was like my education, just hanging out in the back and just meeting these guys. And just, man, back then you don't know anything about comedy. You're just kind of taking it all in.
Yeah. So you worked there 3 years and you were doing mics, and were you doing shows at the same time? Were you like getting booked on shows, or was it just open mic work, trying to get your name established? Like, what was that?
Yeah. You know what I was doing? I was also working at this other place called Gladys's Hamburger Harry's in Times Square. I was one of those guys who would pass out flyers. Like we actually were one of the first flyer people. So I worked the door there. I mean, I worked New York Times at Times Square with a guy named Adam Hunter. It was like 10 of us. A comedian named Melissa Rausch, who's now on Night Court. She's like leading Night Court. This guy named Dave Rubin, who's got this huge Whoop report. Like a bunch of guys who just were all hungry to just do it. As a comic, you just have that insatiable hunger to just do whatever it takes to get good.
Yeah. I feel like comedians in New York have that hunger more than comedians in LA. I feel like there is at least what Wade and Fred have been talking to me about this, about being a dual track kind of person, of doing stand up and trying to like be a writer or be an actor or do something like that. You're doing two different things. But in New York, that's like one of the few places where people still bark, where they still like try to pass out flyers, or they still trying to get, they have to work to get stage time. I mean, yes, now you can like buy stage time for like open mics or whatever, but like a lot of it is barking and stuff. How hard is that? And what's it like? I have no idea what barking is like at all. I've never had to do it ever to get stage time. What is that like? What is it like? What's the hardest part?
Well, for me, the New York winters were hard. Basically, we're outside with flyers, just trying to get people to come in. And that's also though how I learned how to just talk to people because I was kind of just an introverted kid. But I don't know if barking still exists at the way it did back then. Now I feel like if you just pay $5, you can just get up and an open mic or something. But now, back then, it was this new thing of trying to get people into clubs, and they would just extort these young comics. But to your point, I do think New York does breed comics. Like, you got the Mark Normans and Joe List, like really pure stand-ups. But LA breeds one-man production companies. Like everybody out here knows how to shoot a podcast, edit videos. They're more business savvy. I feel a lot of guys in New York, yeah, you can come up the stand-up way, but the LA guys really understand how to leverage all you have.
Yeah, that's what I had to figure out early on is like how to do that. And I was lucky enough that I had Dwayne Perkins come in and just like we hung out and he talked and he said, besides stand up, what else do you do? And I go, oh, a podcast. And he's like, what else? And I go, well, that's it. He's like, no, you got to learn to write. You got to learn to edit. You got to learn. He just started giving me stuff and I'm like writing things down. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I like took film production classes. I learned to write screenplays. Like I did all these things because Dwayne Perkins, who I respect 100%, was like, dude, you got to do more stuff. And then everyone I talked to from then on was like, oh, you're doing so many things. And I'm like, well, yeah, I think you have to. Like, that's just the way it is now. There's no way around it. Now, you're an actor as well. I saw you were on Grimm. I watched that. It was great when it was on. So now I'm going to have to go back and find you in it and watch it again. So sure. NBC, you're about to get my money for a while. And then you're a writer and you are also like not only a screenwriter, but also a book author, which I'm super jealous of because I always want to write a book. I can never get past like chapter 1 for some reason. Like I can outline it. I can do all the stuff. Talk to me about your writing. Talk to me about your acting, all that kind of stuff. Sure.
Well, I went to NYU Film School, right? So that's always been like in my blood of like making things. And I got caught up in the act. I was a model like in my 20s. I got more hair. I was a print model.
You're still a handsome dude. Don't put yourself down. There you go.
But that led to me acting, and I took it really seriously. And I did like a lot of pilots. I was in Grimm. I did some guest stars and networks. Grimm, the episode you're talking about, I was one of the Indian brothers, like these two psychotic Indian brothers. They worked at a garage or something.
Oh yeah, okay.
And they kidnapped this lady, and I was like the son, and we turned into monsters or something. It was a lot of fun. We shot that in Portland. But filmmaking has always been, man, as a comic, you kind of have that, I guess, that creative feeling to create your own work. And so filmmaking has been a great way for me to tap into that. So I've actually shot a few movies, like features and stuff, just by leveraging, the comedians. Like I did a movie called Bobby Khan's Ticket to Hollywood 10 years ago, maybe 12 years ago now. And like, I use all my friends, like Theo Von's in it, Russell Peters is in it, like a great cast. And the movie did pretty well. And I'm so happy. And I just feel like that's the message to all comics. Like, we don't have to wait. Like you're doing a great podcast right now because you don't want to wait for someone to be like, hey, James, you know what? We're going to greenlight you for a podcast 5 years from now. No, you can do it tomorrow. It's a great time we're living in.
It's the best time. And you're right. Everything, you can do it however you want. I want to make I'm a big Christopher Guest fan. Are you big? Do you know Christopher Guest?
Sure.
I want to make a movie about like stand up and improv because those are two things I really love, and put it together and make like a silly movie at some point. I just haven't had the opportunity or funding or whatever, but I'm going to, and I'm going to leverage literally every single one of my comedian friends because I know there's so much talent in the stand-up community that you're going to get amazing people to do stuff. Now you wrote two books, right?
Yeah, I've actually written 3. So
3? Oh, geez, man. Stop being so awesome.
Well, one of them isn't out yet, but
okay.
I'll plug it anyway. So basically I was writing and making films, and I was just really hitting my head against the wall. Like my screenplays would place at like Austin, like great festivals, but they would just hit a wall. So I just started writing books for myself, like novellas and books, and that has opened up so many doors to me. Like, and my message is, when people are going this way, you go this way, because nobody was really doing books at the time. Mm-hmm. So that led to opportunities in Hollywood by just creating my own IP that I own, right? And just a book's so different than reading a screenplay. So I wrote this new book. It's called The Promise that I'll be releasing this week. It's on Amazon right now, but I haven't announced it. And this is more of a serious book. It's about moving to Florida to take care of my mom who passed away from cancer. But regardless, like I always try to find stories that are kind of organic to me.
I think I'm going to buy it because I looked at it and I've been so busy, so I didn't buy it. But Laughing in Hell, which is like stand up comedy, right? Is that the right one, or is the Golden Eagles about stand up?
Yeah, no. Laughing in Hell. I mean, all that stuff really happened to me. A lot of the stories were based on truth.
I love that because that's one of the things I want to do at some point. Is I've had such a weird story of getting into stand up and how my stuff has happened that I eventually want to do like a Pete Holmes-esque style series about stand up, and especially LA, and all my friends and everyone I've done. So anytime I meet anyone, just know you're probably getting written down in my story somewhere. Like the very first comedian that I ever did an open mic with, his name Greg Buckman. He'll be on the podcast at some point, but his catchphrase is "Wow!" Like he does that, and everyone all over LA knows him. And I recently ran into him when I was hanging out with Darren Carter and a bunch of people. And I said, "Hey, Greg, I just want you to know you're the first comedian I ever met that was a working comedian, and you did my first open mic, and you gave me good advice, and you were super nice to me, and so you'll be in my story." And he was like, "Oh, wow, that's awesome," And so everybody I meet, they have a different impact on my life, and I feel like that's what you do too. You take that your life and put it into different things. I'm gonna buy Laughing in Hell right now, actually, while we're on this podcast.
Oh, well, that book really is the book that opened up doors to me. And I honestly wasn't a huge writer. I mean, I used to read a lot in college, but I haven't written books before that. So I didn't even think it was amazing. But when I got meetings from that, people would be like, "Hey, we really like how gritty this book is," because that really came from the heart. Like that really was my reflection of who I was as a person in that book. So if you have a story, I encourage you to explore that on the page, because I'm sure people will be fascinated by who you are.
Yeah, I might write like a story about my childhood and stuff, growing up in Texas and growing up poor and whatever, and just like how that really affected me and stuff. So I might do like a fictionalized version of that, which is kind of funny, and then my change from how I grew up to like then moving to an all-white suburb in Vegas. Like it was really like a real cultural shock of like moving from a neighborhood where it was like Black and Latinos and me and the old soul white guy to moving to an all white neighborhood in Vegas where it was like way different. And it was, some people say, oh, that when they move from like another country to America, they're like, oh, culture shock. Like that is literally culture shock, moving from one neighborhood where you're the minority to a neighborhood where now you're the majority. And it's very weird. So, and I learned a lot about racism because I didn't realize racism existed at the time. And it wasn't until I moved to a all white neighborhood where I realized, oh, there is such a thing as racism, and this is how it works. Because I felt like maybe I was sheltered from it because no one ever, growing up in certain communities, they don't talk about it because it's just like, oh, it's a given. But in white communities, I was like made more aware of it and stuff. So it was really interesting. So I might talk about something like that. Yeah,
there you go.
Now, so how did a book get you meetings? That like you would think a lot of places would go, well, did they ask you, like, do you have a screenplay? Do you have a script or something like that? Or do you have ideas? Like, how did that process work for you?
Honestly, I just got very lucky. Like social media, I just have a lot of friends on social media, and the right person read the book, and that led to some stuff. But that was it. It's luck. I'd love to say like, oh, I'm really talented, but it's really luck, man. Anybody who says luck is not a factor in this, but you can create lucky opportunities by putting yourself out there, by continuing to just work and grind. Like that's how you find it.
Yeah, I think like the saying is like luck is preparation at a specific time. So you're already prepared when the time comes. So that's considered luck, right? So same thing with like people saying like, oh, it takes 10 years to make it, or overnight success is really like 10 years in the making type thing. Like you've already put in the work. You were obviously putting in the work. You were making things, you were creating things, you were writing things. And so just when the opportunity came, you were already prepared. So that's considered luck, but you made your own luck, right?
Yeah. And look, I'm still hustling. Like there's a reason why I have a new book, because that's what I do. Like it's like you doing stand-up, right? People are like, why are you going to so and so town for like $200? Well, it's
Yeah.
like who you are as a person. Like you're gonna keep creating stuff, whether it's books or stand-up or writing, and try to put yourself out there.
Yeah. Now your stand up, what do you like to talk about? Because you worked all over. Talk about some of the people you worked with. Because when you were telling me, I was like, geez Louise, you've done everything. Like I feel like if everyone you're gonna know his name within, I guarantee you 5 years or less, you're gonna know this name, you're gonna see this face, he's gonna be all over the place. I guarantee you, after talking to him, I was like, this guy is gonna be amazing. So I
Oh.
said it now, it's gonna happen. Watch. So just talk about your comedy journey after New York. I want to hear a little bit about that. And then maybe at the end of that, what advice you'd go back and give yourself if you go back in time and give yourself advice too.
Sure. Well, I actually started in Boston, Massachusetts. That's where I started, and that's where I met Dwayne Perkins, because he was
Oh,
actually the guy you mentioned. He was a programmer when I met him, and then
yeah.
he quit his job. And so I started in Boston, and I was like, well, I don't want to end up in Boston. So I went to New York. I went to school in New York. So after that, I got a job as a TV host in LA. Like I was a Bollywood TV host. Like if you look me up, like I was an entertainment reporter. It's like
That's cool.
running around. So I had this manager, and I was in the Hollywood game, and like I was just, I was at the Laugh Factory doing spots, and you really feel like everything's on the up and up. And I just didn't want to be telling jokes. I wanted to like be a filmmaker too, someone who can do more than just, I love stand-up. I still do, it's like my engine, but I want to do more. And so I think that's what got me into filmmaking. And I made a web series called Desi OC. It was like the first South Asian web series, and that went super viral. And that led to a lot of opportunities. And that led to us making a feature movie. And that's the movie I was talking about. But, after that movie, we made that movie. It didn't, I got cast on a pilot, like a Disney pilot. And man, everything kind of just ended, like it was really just deflating. And I actually tried to leave. I was like, let me just get a day job. And so I got a day job for a few years. I was working at UTA, which is a big agency, right? I was an assistant there, and I was just doing spots at the Comedy Store because they were giving me development spots. So I had this weird dichotomy of working this entertainment job and also doing comedy at nights, but I wasn't auditioning anymore. I was just doing both. And I was like, this is ridiculous. Like, what am I doing here? And so after a while, I just pieced out, and I was like, let me go back to comedy full time. But I think you learn a lot through just failure, because everybody thinks, hey, it's just going to be given to you. Like, especially when you're young, you have this hope, which happens all the time. Like, I'm not trying to say it doesn't happen, but you kind of have to go through this wave of just failure, success, ebb and flow. And it gets hard as a comic because all your friends are buying houses and they have this normal life, but you're out here trying to find yourself. So I would just say, the comedy thing, you can't judge yourself. You can't judge your path. Everybody's path is totally different. And what's worked for me is by being authentic, like things that are authentic to me. Like, you can't follow somebody else, what they did. You got to do James's, right?
Yeah.
What you're doing is what's going to find you an audience.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. A lot of people are like, why is it the Clean Comedy Podcast? Why are you talking about clean comedy? I'm like, that's my thing. That's what I do. That's my love, my joy. Like, I love that stuff. Not that I don't love blue or dirty comedy or whatever. Carlin's one of my favorites of all time. But, if you go look in I still have a CD player in my car, by the way, so this is how poor I am. If you go in my car and you turn on CD right now, Jerry Seinfeld's CD is playing in my car. I literally will listen to Seinfeld bits as I drive around. I also I know the 5 CDs that are in there. There is a Richard Pryor one. There's a Sam Kinison, Jerry Seinfeld, Rodney Dangerfield, and then the other slot is empty right now. I think I took it out. Oh no, there was a Bill Cosby album in there, but I took it out. So
Did you ever try being dirty, or was it always something you gravitated toward, being clean?
When I started, I had a comedy coach that wanted me to do a semi Andrew Dice Clay type character that was like a husband, but he was like kind of a misogynistic, whatever and stuff. So it was semi dirty, like a little dirty. There was no cursing or whatever, but it was like semi dirty kind of stuff. But it was just like, it wasn't really for me. And I tried it because I was learning, right? I wanted to learn with us. But as I brought it to my wife, she was like, no, that's not who you are. Like, it's going to be weird. And then I knew if I did that, I couldn't bring my kids, or I couldn't bring friends or family or whatever, the people that I wanted to engage with, that I wanted to be my target or core audience, that I couldn't do those kind of jokes. So I learned structure, I learned setup, I learned all that stuff there. And then I kind of pivoted to how I wanted. And I was making friends with comedians who were like-minded, like clean comedians and stuff. Like one of my first friends is like Jenna Kim Jones, and then David Studebaker, who's clean, and then Paul Moonjean, who you met at dinner, who is mostly clean. He has a few bits here and there. I know that he's done a little thing, but most of the time he has a dry bar special, but he's had done little things here and there. But like all my friends were pretty clean. Darren Carter, like all these people that I was just kind of in contact. But I have like a bigger group of people that I know. Like we hung out, and you saw Jay Washington, and we like walked up, we hugged each other, like people like that I know. I respect all their processes because there's always something to be learned from that. But I knew clean comedy was going to be my thing. I knew it was going to be, I love Gaffigan and Regan, and like, I saw Mitch Hedberg back in the day, and I just saw all these comedians, and I was like, I want to be this silly, fun kind of guy. And I've struggled with that too, right? Because you go, like, you want to be authentic, but you also want to be funny. And there's a lot of things about me that I think are funny, but it's hard to make them work on stage. Like, I have like a really sad childhood, and I really want to talk about it like Christopher Titus style, but as I wrote it out, it became sad. It wasn't funny. Right. And I would like try to make it funny. My wife was like, that's just dark now. Now you're getting dark. It was like, so I have to like kind of go back to the drawing board. That's why I probably should write it as a book, because then it can like have a different kind of life, because on stage
Sure.
it died,
It also changes too every time. I mean, who knows? I mean, you probably have like the genesis of who you are, but that can also change and make you unique. So you're not just a replica of Gaffigan or Seinfeld. You're
No.
a voice, which you probably already have. I mean, it's different for everybody.
Yeah. I know I'm probably about 70% on what my voice is, but I'm still working out a lot of that. I haven't done as much on my military life. I haven't done as much on my childhood. I've kind of like stayed in like family and dad stuff or whatever, because like I said, when I go talk about childhood or family stuff, like I do a whole bit about being spanked as a kid or whatever, and I can make that funny, but there are other incidents that if I go there could be very dark and disturbing and sad for people. And so I'm working with Craig Shoemaker, and he has stories like that about his childhood that are dark and sad that he has managed to turn into something very funny and humorous and people love. So that's what I'm kind of like, his mentorship is helping me get there. So I think probably in a year or so, I'll have that bigger structure and a more well-rounded personality. How long did it take for you to find your voice and your personality on stage?
Oh, I'm still looking. I mean, someone actually mentioned this to me 2 days ago, because there's a clip of me at the Laugh Factory from maybe 20 years ago, and I'm killing. And I'm this young kid, like, in my early 20s. And he was like, you even do this material anymore? And I was like, dude, honestly, I don't, because back then I was just like an actor, comic, trying to just, oh, I'm Indian from New Hampshire. It was like the generic jokes, whatever I was doing. And now at least I have like a point of view. I've also gone through some darkness, which I kind of bring to my act. So I feel like I'm more connected to who I am now than anything. So to answer your question, I have not found my voice in terms of like, I'm not like at the apex of who I am. I don't think it's ever going to stop, but I'm much closer to who I am intrinsically as a person. Like I was not close to this, and nor should anyone know exactly right off the bat. I mean, this is like a long-term game to fight to figure out who you are.
Yeah, I know, because it's always weird because people are like, I'll make it in 5 years. And you're like, you don't have a voice yet. You're just telling like whatever standard traditional jokes, Tinder jokes or Uber jokes or weenie jokes or whatever. No one knows who you are, right? No, you go out there and no one knows who you are. And it's kind of hard if no one knows you. They just go, okay, you talk about weed, or you talk about Tinder, or you talk about whatever. Who are you, right? And then when you get to that core of who you are and you start to open up and you start to like kind of dig a little bit, you become this, it shows. Like my friend David, you know who he is. Like you watch his set, you go, oh, I know who this guy is. You know, if you watch Paul, you know who he is. Like all these people, Darren Carter, you know who he is. And then he has the great closer that he does. I like my women like I like my whatever, but he does the rooster and he talks about childhood and growing up. So you get to know who Darren is. So once you find your voice, you can do so much. That's probably the hardest part.
And this voice is what you can, I guess, transmute in your books, your films, like once you know that. And I just want to be clear, like making it is a lot different than figuring out your voice. Like if you look back in the day, there were people making it off 3 years in the comedy, 4 years stand-up comedy, like back when Johnny Carson was around, like putting people on. So you can have the rough outline and you can still make it in Hollywood because then you can just figure it out as you go along. But to be like a great comic, like I think Louis C.K. is probably one of the best comics working, but he was a guy, just a diamond in the rough, figuring out that whatever he does on stage. So it's again, everyone has a different process, but I believe it's the long-term play that really makes the comic great.
Yeah. Now, what's your joke writing process? Are you one of the guys who works it out on stage, or are you a person who sits down and meticulously writes it? Do you set aside time? Like, what's your process for writing? Because that's always different from comedian to comedian.
For me, I sit down and I write an hour a day. Like I write. I mean, it sounds like they're one-liners, but they're actually connected. I try to like base it off my real life, but those are fine. But the longer sets I do, I realize that audiences get tired of just joke. You really have to put in stories. You really have to take your time. For me, I do crowd work sometimes just to break it up. But for me, I'm a joke guy. Like I love Attell. I love Jonathan Katz. I love this guy named Drake Sather, who passed away. He was a great joke writer. I like guys like that. But to headline and to really give them a good show, you have to have both worlds kind of intersect, and you got to be a real person on stage. You can't just be a joke book.
Yeah. Do you think we'll ever see any other Mitch Hedbergs ever again? Because that was kind of what I think of, like when I think of like people who can do just like pure great jokes, right? You just love every joke that he does, and it's a joke, but you like love it. The escalator, like for probably most people, if you've ever listen to stand up, you could probably do some Mitch Hedberg jokes just because they're so pure joke style. Like, do you think we'll ever see that again, or you think it's going to be stories from now on? Like, because that's become the trend, right?
Well, I think the podcasting world has really bled into comedy, where a lot of podcasters are now doing comedy, and I think audiences are kind of conditioned to hearing stories. So it's okay to go to a club and see someone just tell stories for 90 minutes. That's accepted, but there is still out there, like, I mean, look, David Tell is, I consider, one of the greatest joke writers of all time. He's still out there banging away, with a hammer, like bang, 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 bang. I just worked with Kurt Metzger, who's a great joke writer. So there are guys out there who are doing what they do, as they should. I mean, not everyone's the same. Like, and it's great to be able to do both on stage. You want a quick joke, you want a story. It's like jazz.
Yeah, exactly. Now, you mentioned crowd work. That is like something I'm terrible at. What makes crowd work for you? Like, how did you learn that?
Well, for me, I started as a host in New York. I used to host a lot of shows. And then when I went to Florida this past 2 years, a club out there made me like the house MC because I was just more experienced than a lot of the comics out there. So at first, I was really resistant to hosting again, but man, I had so much fun hosting. And I was like, this is so much fun just being and it was like a Friday, Saturday night. There's like a different energy when the room is packed. And so now I really enjoy hosting or doing crowd work. I know it's a big thing now doing the clips and stuff, but like I just hosted it's a club called Side Splitters in Tampa. And I had so much fun. I just been putting up clips on my Instagram of me just messing with the crowd. And I think a good host is someone who's having fun, but it's also unifying the audience. Like you're not just doing separate shows for individual tables, but like you're bringing the room together through your jokes, you're conditioning you're conditioning the audience, showing them it's a comedy show, but you're also interacting with them and just kind of loosening them up. So everyone's got a different style, but that's what I do.
Now, what is you see a lot of people posting crowd work tips, videos in the internet, but I know it's like really like a lot of people will poo-poo on it, but it's really a hard thing to master because when you write a joke, you write the joke, you know what the punchline is, but when you do crowd work, anything can happen. How do you prepare for that? Because that's the thing I'm terrified about with crowd work. Like, I don't want to do crowd work because I don't know what the outcome is going to be, right? And it could blow up in your face. And so since I'm not good at it, like if you were trying to tell somebody how to get better at crowd work or how to do it, what would be your advice, or how have you gotten through that process?
Well, why do you think you're not good at it? First of all, let's start there.
Because I don't know what to like. I think like I'm scared of something going off the rails where I can't control it. Like, so maybe that's what it is I fear letting the audience kind of like decide where this goes, as opposed to I'm telling you where it goes because I'm telling you the jokes or I'm telling you the stories or whatever. Maybe that's what it is. I don't know. I just don't feel like I'm good at it. I don't feel like it's a skill that I've mastered or even am intermediate at. I'm a pure amateur. I feel that way. Maybe that's not true, but to me, it's a scary thing for me. Maybe that's the better way to put it.
I'm only asking because I talked to another comic and he's a strong feature in Florida, and he said the same thing. He goes, "I'm scared." And I'm coming from a person. I'm not the best at crowd work. I just do it, but I'm not professing to be a master at it.
Right.
But I think getting over that fear and being able to just flow with, look, it's a comedy show. People want to be in a natural environment. So even if you flub, like I'm sure you've done jokes where you can't remember like the ending and you're like, I can't remember this. Man, I always feel the audience, 100%, they're always on my side to finish the joke, 100%. So even if you were to like lose control a little bit, like the audience will always be on your side. So I think as a host, man, if you go up there as a host and you just do straight stand-up and do your act, man, you're really missing out because you have an opportunity where it's okay to talk to people. It's okay to take some chances. Like if you do all crowd work as a feature, like you're kind of messing up the headliner, but as a host, man, you got to get over that fear, dude. And you got to be okay to fail because you're not going to fail. You're the host. Like there's no pressure on you. Like the pressure's on the headliner. It's his show.
Yeah.
I would say get over that fear and just take some risk on stage. Like if you're not taking a risk, what are you doing on every level? Host, feature, headliner. If you're not taking a risk on stage, you're wasting your time.
Yeah. No, that's good. I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna add a little crowd work because I've had moments of success where I could see like, oh, I can do this, but then I like immediately pull away because I'm like, oh, if this goes bad, it goes real bad, you know. So I like pull back like on myself. And yeah, I don't know if it's I think Jerry Seinfeld once said he like can watch himself do stand up. So I'll see those moments of me like doing something. And I'm like, oh, this is going great. And then I like that one side of me goes, all right, stop now before you like totally mess this up. Like pull back, you know, that other voice will come and say, stop. You're going to screw this all up, you know? So.
Sure. You know who Laurie Kilmartin is?
Yes.
So I just saw her at the Hollywood Improv and she gave me some great advice like a decade ago. Like we did some casino and I had to remind her, she didn't remember, but I was performing with her and I was probably amateurish. And she said, did you listen to yourself? Did you record yourself? I had like a tape recorder. I was like, yeah. She goes, listen to yourself between the jokes. Because sometimes like I'll say stuff between the jokes and that would get a laugh. And my point is sometimes we have this persona of who we want to be on stage, but then we've got that under, you know, who we really are in between the jokes. Like we create this facade of like who we want the audience to interpret us, but really it's what's underneath. Like that's who the audience really connects with. And I think when you host, it kind of, if you talk to the audience, it kind of forces you to like be a real person and kind of like dig into who is this guy really or she on stage? Like, who is this person? And there's the connection that you can't really find. And if you can bring that to your act, man, game over. Yeah.
That's good. I'm going to take that. And I know that Craig has said, I've got to be my more authentic self too. I've got to get there because right now it's not jokey, but it's like, you could tell like there is this of 100% of who I am, I'm giving you 10 to 20%, right? Which is not the whole thing. So people laugh, they like the jokes, they do whatever, but it's not 100% there. So I'm not getting everything I possibly could. It's not becoming the best that it could be. So that's the part where, and it's also hard because, if I expose all of myself, there is 100%, the chance of you failing is larger. Or at least that's the way I feel. I don't know if that's actually true, but that fear comes to me of going, I'm exposing everything to you. Now you have more to attack me with. Where if I only expose 10 to 20% of myself to you, then there's only that little bit that you can hurt me with, type thing. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. When my mom passed away last year, and I made the mistake of performing at this club called Side Splitters. Off the Hook in Naples, Florida, right? And I was doing a guest spot, and I just started talking about. I had all these cancer jokes that I wanted to talk about, dude. Like I just bombed, because they were like, I'm doing cancer jokes on a show on a guest spot, right? Anyways, probably wasn't even funny. But after the show, I had so many people come up to me. I didn't even care about my comedy. They just wanted to talk to me as a person because I was able to connect with them on another level. I was almost like I was giving a TED talk or something. And I was like, man, there's something here about this topic and about connecting with the audience. Now I have about maybe 3 minutes about my mom, and I made it funny through jokes. But it hits at another level now because I'm able to now connect, but also have the jokes. It's different than what I was doing 20 years ago, at the Laugh Factory talking about being an Indian in New Hampshire or something. You know what I'm saying? It's a different type of connection.
I like that. That's good. Now, last thing, if you could go back in time and give yourself one piece of a comedy advice and say, you get to go in a time machine, go back in time, you find your young self starting comedy, you grab them and say, listen, if you do this thing, your career will be so much easier or better or whatever. What's that piece of advice that you give them?
Oh, well, I would just tell myself not to beat myself up so much because like I'm extremely hard on myself. And I did not take rejection. I came close to a lot of things, I got so many audition stories of like coming close to getting on TV shows, and like Ashton Kutcher kicked me out of the room when I almost went punk. Like I've got so many stories on that line where it's like this close, on pilots. I got edited out of pilots, and you take it personal because then you see your friends, like you can't help you to see your friends like be very successful. But again, it's not about that. It's about figuring out your path, right? Because man, this business makes no sense. And that's why I say there's a lot of luck involved. Like everybody, at some point, everybody works hard, but there's an X factor, which kind of graces people. And when that happens to you, man, you better be ready because you're going to have that shot once. And if you can really capitalize, and if you're talented, you can exploit it and like ride it like a rocket ship.
I love it. Well, where can everyone find you? Just shout out any socials, anything you want to promote, and then we'll put all that stuff in the show notes too.
Sure. You can find me on Instagram, Tarun Shetty, or Facebook, Tarun Shetty Comic.
Do you have stuff coming up in August or the end of July or anything like that?
Yeah, I'll be in Florida actually, so I'll be doing shows out there in Florida. But
Okay.
Check on my Instagram, and if you guys, I'll be releasing this book this week. It's called The Promise. It's a new book I wrote. I hope you guys can check it out. It's a personal book about, living in Florida, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, thanks for having me, man. I do appreciate
No problem. I appreciate it so much. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for checking out the podcast. Thank you for checking out podcast clips. I'm learning how to clip podcasts. That's like something I'm doing with social media, putting up there. I'm going to separate out my Instagram from the Clean Comedy Podcast. I'm going to have my own official stand-up things. So I can post stand-up clips. Because I feel like it was getting a little confusing and I wanted to be more clear on what I'm doing. So there will be the Clean Comedy Podcast, and then I have not decided the title, but I think I also might be changing my stage name. So we'll see what happens there too. Because I'm going to go back to my childhood name. Growing up, I was known as JD. But as an adult, I was like, oh, I need to be more, corporate and whatever. So I went to James, which I realized I am a JD. I'm a silly, funny, weird guy. And JD fits me more. Although I always have people say, how do you spell that? I'm like, it's 2 letters. I don't know what's wrong with you. Like they want to add a bunch of letters on to JD. It's like, it doesn't make any sense to me. So thank you so much for watching. Again, Tarun, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Everybody have a good one, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.